Would Ayn Rand vote for Javier Milei? Just as the globalist Marxist deep state forced a bioweapon on the world, attempting to implement their eugenics depopulation agenda, out of nowhere, from an obscure country, burst the most pro-free market, pro-freedom politician in a century. Super Milei is not trying to make peace with these people. He's not interested in a truce. He's not interested in a comfortable peace or making the things more efficient. He intends to vanquish this evil philosophy and banish it from the world. Would Ayn Rand approve? On one of the biggest stages in the world, Milei invokes the image of Atlas Shrugged to describe the dystopian state of the world today.
What kind of society can wokeism create? A society that replaced the free exchange of goods and services with the arbitrary distribution of wealth at gunpoint. One that replaced free communities with forced collectivization. One that replaced the creative chaos of the market with the sterile and sclerotic order of socialism. A society filled with resentment, where there are only two types of people. Those who are net taxpayers on the one hand, and those who are beneficiaries of the state on the other. And by this, I don't refer to those who receive social assistance because they don't have enough to eat. I'm talking about the privileged corporations, the bankers who were bailed out during the subprime crisis, the majority of media outlets, the indoctrination centers disguised as universities, the state bureaucracy, the unions, social organizations, and the crony businesses that thrive of the taxes paid by hard-working individuals and taxpayers. I'm talking about the world described by Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged, which unfortunately has become a reality. It is a system where the big winner is the political class, which becomes both a referee and stakeholder in this redistribution game. I say it again. The political class is a referee and stakeholder, an interested party in this redistribution. Of course, the one who redistributes is the one who keeps the lion's share.
In order to decide if Ayn Rand would vote for Milei, let's first take a look at Ayn Rand's voting record. In the first election that she could vote in, she voted for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The reason she voted for FDR is because he promised to get rid of prohibition. But she was quickly disillusioned by his Marxist policies. It's amazing that Ayn Rand, who preached the importance of philosophy, was so easily fooled by one-issue politics. After the success of her novel Atlas Shrugged, she put her weight behind Barry Goldwater for president. My impression of Barry Goldwater, who was a senator for 20 years after his failed presidential bid, was that he was just a standard conservative and left Ayn Rand disillusioned. This, along with the disillusionment that she felt with her business partners, led her to be very critical of politicians. In Hollywood, Ayn Rand worked with Ronald Reagan at the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals. Thus, you think she might have supported Ronald Reagan in his presidential bid. She had supported him to be governor of California, but she was not a fan of his when he ran to be president. I think she was particularly disillusioned by Ronald Reagan's courting of the moral majority of the religious right, which she considered anti-reason. Rand made it clear that she was a proponent of reason more than she was a proponent of capitalism and the free market. She had no use for the ideas that rejected reason and supported capitalism. Given her voting record, would she have supported Javier Milei? Well, let's analyze the major areas of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics, and see if the two are consistent with each other. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the ultimate nature of reality. In the Western world, almost everyone falls into either the Aristotelian point of view or the Platonic, that is, Aristotle or Plato's point of view on metaphysics. The way Rand describes Aristotle's metaphysics is A, whereas in Plato's world, A is always A prime. The best way to think of Plato's metaphysics is to think of the allegory of the cave. He has these ideal forms But all we can perceive with our senses is the shadows of these perfect forms on the cave wall. The popular film The Matrix illustrates this issue. It illustrates Plato's point of view from Descartes' evil genius problem, where there is an evil genius or a god who manipulates our senses so we can't tell what reality is. In The Matrix, by taking the red pill, you're able to perceive reality. But to Rand and Aristotle, we can perceive reality with our own senses. This is a perfect time to bring up the issue that Javier Milei and Rand differ on the subject of religion. Milei often talks about his Jewish faith in his speeches, and Rand was an atheist, although she was raised Jewish. And it is quite common for religious people to hold a Platonic point of view. The perfect world is the world that God and the angels live in, and we only see a vague reflection of that world. Despite this, Milei has always talked about looking at the data. He likes Milton Friedman because he always points to the data. Pointing to the data is an Aristotelian point of view, not a Platonic point of view. Milei seems to use his Jewish faith mainly to give inspiration and to point to stories that he thinks can inspire people. But I'd say Milei is definitely Aristotelian in his metaphysics. So Ayn Rand and Javier Milei seem to agree on metaphysics. But what about epistemology? We have to remember that Milei is not a philosopher, he's an economist. So it's a little hard to tease out some of these points. However, we do know that Milei was a fan of Friedrich Hayek. He often talks about Friedrich Hayek's fatal conceit. Hayek's ideas on fatal conceit come directly from his ideas of cultural evolution, which essentially defines his epistemology. Hayek's theory of cultural evolution suggests that norms and practices emerge through a process akin to Darwin's evolution at the group level. Where the groups are more effective, rules and customs are more likely to survive and thrive. And it follows from this that Hayek was a critic of the efficacy of reason. Given this, it's not surprising that Ayn Rand was not a fan of Friedrich Hayek. From Hayek's point of view, it's impossible to know if certain policies will be successful or not before you try them. This anti-conceptual point of view is clearly not consistent with what Javier Milei has done. He's very clear that he knows that they're on the right path, that this is the path of economic progress and freedom. But Javier Milei is also a fan of Ludwig von Mises. Interestingly enough, Ludwig von Mises and Rand knew each other and were friends. She thought he was an excellent economist, but a bad philosopher. One of the reasons she felt this way was because Ludwig von Mises' epistemology is consistent with the ideas of Immanuel Kant. And Immanuel Kant, from my point of view, is just warmed over Plato, with his noumenal and phenomenal worlds, being the perfect world of ideal forms in Plato and the reality that we see. But this epistemological approach is more consistent with Marxists, who always argue that real socialism has never been tried. That is, the ideal form has never been realized on this earth and can't be realized on this earth. Milei always points to reality in the data. He doesn't divide the world into this perfect world and then the empirical world that we can see, like Mises does. It's clear by his actions and his statements that Javier Milei believes in the power of reason. Thus, I believe Javier Milei and Ayn Rand have the same basic approach to epistemology. Rand often made the point that capitalism cannot be defended just on utilitarian grounds. It must be defended morally. Many conservatives and libertarians have tried to defend capitalism as being more altruistic than socialism. Milei said in his Davos speech in 2024 that capitalism is evil because it's individualistic, and that collectivism is good because it's altruistic, with the money of others. Clearly, this is a bit of sarcasm. He also said, in the battle to save Western civilization, there's no room for individual ego. And Ludwig von Mises, favorite of Milei, said there's no such thing as an objective or scientific ethics. All ethics is subjective. Did a whole video comparing Mises' subjective theory of ethics to Rothbard's objective theory of ethics. I'll put that in the show notes. Milei sides with Rothbard on this issue and clearly has an objective theory of ethics, as these clips show.
Capitalism is not only much more productive, but it is also the only one that is fair. It is superior in ethically and morally because it treats everyone the same under the law, and it is also not based on theft. Therefore, in the face of this situation, you must find and face a system of values. The system of values of communism and socialism, for any version of socialism, are envy, hatred, and resentment, punishing the successful, stealing the fruit of work by force.
Milei sounds like Rand here. He's defending capitalism as not only being more productive, but morally superior. In this next clip, Milei sounds like Ayn Rand, who often said, in any negotiation between good and evil, only evil can benefit. And this is Milei's version for politicians.
We must never negotiate ideas in order to get a vote. Denying your convictions to get votes will leave you without conviction and without votes. In short, we defend life, freedom, and private property. We, on the other hand, are not willing to negotiate ideas.
Here's another clip showing Milei's unwilling to negotiate with evil.
There may never be an agreement between good and evil because we work for opposite interests. You cannot negotiate the terms of a reform with those who live by preserving one's privileges. Between good and evil because we work for opposing interests.
I think it's clear that both Rand and Milei hold an objective theory of ethics, based in reason. When it comes to political philosophy, both Rand and Milei are clearly free market capitalists. However, Milei describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist, and Rand was not a fan of anarcho-capitalism. He was particularly skeptical of the idea of these insurance companies that act to protect your rights. At best, these insurance companies are governments, and at worst, it becomes a gang warfare. Interestingly enough, Milei never talks about this idea of insurance companies enforcing your rights. When Milei talks about anarcho-capitalism, it appears to be aspirational. He wants the goal of having as small of a state as possible. When it comes to the legal system, Milei is firmly grounded in Locke's ideas of life, liberty, and property, which is actually the basis of capitalism. So when it comes to political philosophy, they are almost in complete agreement. Milei does not discuss a philosophy of aesthetics. However, he discusses the need to win the cultural war.
8. Giving the cultural battle from power is not only advisable, but also an obligation. Having a good idea is just the beginning. In order for it to be effective, it must be correctly communicated. The left is the proof that the most terrible ideas can triumph culturally if they have good marketing.
One of the reasons that Ayn Rand became a novelist is that she also understood the importance of winning the cultural battle. Milei not only makes the point that we need to win the cultural battle, but he makes the point that we are culturally superior. For instance, he often points to the drab and ugly buildings that the Soviet Union built. We only need to look at how wokeism has destroyed some of the great Hollywood franchises of today.
As we are crushing them in the cultural battle, because we are not only superior economically, we are morally superior. We are superior aesthetically. We are better than them at everything.
But why do you call them shit?
Because they are shit.
In summary, I would say Milei and Rand are both Aristotelian when it comes to metaphysics. They both subscribe to reason in epistemology. They both believe in an objective set of ethics. And they're both capitalists politically, and they both believe in beauty aesthetically. So I would say Milei is philosophically the closest politician to Ayn Rand we've ever had.